Reaction to what the House Speaker just said about women in this country have less freedom than their mothers, that this is a slap in the face, an insult to women about making their own decisions for their reproductive futures.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I have two daughters who are 13 and 10, and the idea that they will grow up with less rights than I have at the age of 49. My entire life, I have had a belief that in freedom and equality, and the fact that we have gone back after 50 years is absolutely devastating. It is devastating, and we are furious.
Alexis, this decision was leaked several weeks back. Samuel Alito obviously authoring the decision for the majority on the Supreme Court. There was some belief that perhaps the language would be tweaked somewhat. It appears that that simply is not the case, that the majority on the court held firm on this. Did you believe that this was coming, given the political dynamic in this country, that the court is now 6-3, given the recent appointments to the court? Or did you think that a 50-year precedent would simply hold despite the political dynamics right now?
We have been believing that this would happen particularly for the last few years, and certainly anyone listening to the oral arguments in December believed that this was a very distinct possibility. But there's a difference between belief and hope, and we spent the last, few weeks after this leak still trying to hold on to hope beyond measure that something would be different, that the outrage that the court would see would change someone's mind. Because the reality is this is just going to be devastating. It is going to create a healthcare crisis in this country for people who need access to abortion care. And so, yes, I believed it would happen. I believed that the court showed its hand in that leak. And yet I still tried to have faith and hope that something could be different.
Alexis McGill-Johnson, President Planned Parenthood Action Fund. Alexis, who said she is 49 years old, and today she has recognizes that her own daughters have fewer rights, she says, than she did when she was their age, and talking about a decision that they anticipated, but the day has come, and now Planned Parenthood and those who support a woman's right to choose will have to take action on their own moving forward. I want to recap for those of you watching ABC News Live coverage this morning. The Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, a 50-year precedent in this country, turning that decision-making process back to the states on the state level for legislation involving abortion rights. And as you know, if you've been watching here this morning, and forgive me for repeating that number, if you're just joining us though, 26 states plan to take action immediately or very soon, 13 of which have these so-called trigger laws in effect that would trigger a change immediately when it comes to a woman's right to make this decision on her own. The former First Lady Michelle Obama issuing a statement moments ago: "I am heartbroken today. I am heartbroken for people around this country who just lost the fundamental right to make informed decisions about their own bodies." Again, reaction from both sides of the aisle, from former President Obama, the former First Lady, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi moments ago, and then on the other side, former Vice President Mike Pence, who of course ran on this along with former President Trump, who said if elected that they would appoint justices who would overturn Roe versus Wade. You can never predict how many justices a certain president will have an opportunity to appoint to the court. In this case, it was 3, and it changed the makeup of the court significantly. And we are here today. I want to bring in Rachel Scott, who we showed you some time ago down in front of the court. And Rachel, we have seen in these live pictures that the crowd has only grown, and I presume there are people there on both sides of this issue.
Both sides of the issue, David, and the crowd is truly growing by the minute. This is sending a seismic jolt throughout the country, and we are seeing that play out here right in front of the Supreme Court. Because the moment that this decision came out, it was read out here on this loudspeaker, and you had this polarized divide represented. Where on one side you had cheers, applause, tears of joy. On the other, you had immense frustration. I want to give you a look at what we are seeing behind us right now. On one side here, you have people saying Roe is illegitimate. You say this decision is wrong. On the other side, you have people celebrating this. We've also seen the police presence start to grow as well. You can see the lines of officers surrounding this fencing right out here outside of the Supreme Court. This fencing up around the Supreme Court has been up since that draft was leaked. It started and created this immense response out here where we have seen people gather here outside of the Supreme Court every single decision day waiting for this to happen. Advocates say that although this is a seismic shift, that the ground has been shaking for so long because, David, as you have mentioned, 13 states have these so-called trigger bans where abortion would immediately be severely rejected or banned altogether, David.
Mike, Rachel Scott live at the Supreme Court here this morning. Rachel, I really appreciate you reporting in and reflecting the scene there on the ground. The crowd growing with Rachel standing by down there, and we'll go back to her should we need to momentarily. Again, the reaction coming in, both sides of this issue. Many believe this is a victory 50 years in the making in this country. We heard from Carol Tobias, the president of the National Right to Life Committee, who told me she's ecstatic that this was some time in the making. We asked her about the polling in this country that shows the majority of Americans believe this is a woman's right. She said that should be determined at the state level. And that's what many on that side of the argument continue to say here this morning, that what the Supreme Court did was to give this back to the states, which is what they have been fighting for all along. On the flip side, we're hearing from former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton moments ago saying most Americans believe the decision to have a child is one of the most sacred decisions there is, and that such decisions should remain between patients and their doctors. Mrs. Clinton says today's Supreme Court opinion will live in infamy as a step backward for women's rights and for human rights here in the U.S. Which takes me back to Cecilia Vega, our chief White House correspondent. Cecilia, you covered Hillary Clinton's campaign going into 2016. This obviously was a major issue on both sides of that campaign. And when we think about recent history in this country, it just shows you an election can then determine, obviously, who gets appointed to the court and can have swift and major impacts on the direction one way or another in this country.
I think, David, what we are looking at right now on that screen of what is happening outside of the Supreme Court is the legacy of Donald Trump. This very much is about what Donald Trump did, and it's not just on the Supreme Court in terms of who he appointed. He has appointed a record number of federal judges on federal courts around the country as well. And look, I want to point out we're over an hour since this decision has been made, and we have still yet to hear from President Biden or anyone at the top levels of his administration. We're waiting to find out if, in fact, he will address the nation on this country. Certainly, progressives around the country, not just in Washington, are now looking to him and to his administration as the face for what happens next. He will be the one to push this fight for abortion rights as we head into the midterms in a few months. The Democrats, when you talk to them in the lead up to this, having read this leaked draft opinion, had very much said that the issue of abortion would be a galvanizing one for the midterms. Certainly that is expected to happen now. And we talk about the politics of this, but we have to remember the polling on abortion has been consistent for decades in our country. By a majority of voters, a 2-to-1 or more than a 2-to-1 margin believe that the court should have upheld the Roe versus Wade decision. So certainly Democrats will use this going forward. President Biden had said and has been saying in the lead up to this decision that this is now going to be about voters at the ballot box. But what is happening at this turn of events, David, this is not just about federal elections. Certainly they matter. What we're seeing here shows the legacy of former President Trump. This is now very much going to be about state elections and state legislators, governors, particularly in red states and these states with trigger laws that are now carrying this out at a state level. This is a decision that has an immediate trickle down effect. And David, on the politics of this, I just want to point out one more thing. The White House and administration officials have been sounding the alarm about what this decision means from a broader perspective, that today's decision is about abortion. They very much feel that this could then be interpreted to apply to other civil rights issues, perhaps same-sex marriages. Will this be interpreted as something that could impact those? And Clarence Thomas, in his concurring opinion, I'll leave it to Terry and others to weigh in on this, says that this means the Supreme Court could reconsider substantive due process cases, including same-sex marriage. So they have been sounding the alarm on that. And not just that, things like IVF, in vitro fertilization. And if states are interpreting this as life begins at conception, how many other things in our life will this decision impact today?
Cecilia Vega, who has been reporting for some weeks now, the president's position on this, the Biden administration saying that this decision, if in fact it is the decision, and we learned today that it is, and it did not change from several weeks back when it was leaked, the Biden administration saying this decision does not happen in a vacuum, that it very well could affect many issues in this country beyond simply a woman's right to make her own decision on her reproductive future. I want to bring in Jean Mancini, president for the March for Life. And Jean, we're looking at these live pictures at the Supreme Court, obviously the crowd growing. And as Rachel Scott just reported, and you don't need me to tell you, the crowd growing on both sides of this issue. I just am curious, your reaction here this morning and what you make of the court's decision.
Right. Well, I'm no stranger to growing crowds. So, of course, the March for Life, just by way of explanation, we are the largest annual human rights demonstration. We started the year after Roe v. Wade, and we literally have hundreds of thousands of people cross the Supreme Court every anniversary of Roe v. Wade in January. And we've had collectively millions of Americans march for life over the years. And so I'm just thinking so much about all of the marchers over these years as today Roe has been overturned, and the question of abortion goes back to the legislative branches, primarily in the states, also at the national level. I think it's really important not to fearmonger about what's happening. I mean, some of the news reports are, I think that they can evoke a lot of things that are not reality here. So this is about specifically allowing states to be able to decide when the limits to abortion can happen. So the case that went before the Supreme to lead to this was about allowing a 15-week ban on abortion. And under Roe, our country could not have that 15-week ban on abortion. Let's be clear that the United States is one of only 7 countries around the world that allows late-term abortion. And so this puts us back in line with most mainstream countries in Europe, for example. So now states will have the right to enact limitations, will be able to protect life. And I, for one, am very grateful.
Jean Mancini with the March for Life. Jean, I'm curious what you would say. We had a doctor on earlier who worked at the Planned Parenthood, the only clinic in Arkansas, who this very morning is on the phone with women saying we're going to have to find alternate routes for you, which she said could mean 6, 7, 8-hour drives to other states. What would you say to those women and about those women?
What I'd say is that you've got this, that you've got so many opportunities in front of you, and that is a growing life, an actual human being, the poorest of the poor, the most vulnerable, the unborn that is within you. And we'd love to give you all sorts of resources to choose adoption, to be able to support you to make the choice for life. But there's also chemical abortion in this country. There are also other states. So what we're not talking about here is abortion being made illegal in the United States. What we are talking about is states being able to reflect what the people want through their votes. So if she, that woman has all sorts of different options in front of her, and I would offer that adoption is a beautiful and noble and viable option as well.
Jean Mancini, the president, March for Life, pointing out that the marches began 1 year after Roe versus Wade, some 50 years ago, embracing what they consider a major victory this morning from the Supreme Court. Our thanks to Jean for weighing in here with us here this morning. I want to bring back in Terry Moran, who has covered the Supreme Court for many years for ABC News. And Terry, we heard from the House Speaker just a short time ago talking about what many are going to feel is a bit of a contradiction, a bit of whiplash between yesterday's ruling on guns and then today's ruling on abortion. I know there are many differences in both of these cases, but at sort of the 30,000 feet here, the gun decision said the states couldn't make decisions on guns that would affect the Second Amendment. Today's decision says the states should make the decision on a woman and her reproductive future. Help people at home who are going to hear this, and some who will believe, yes, that does sound like a contradiction, like there is hypocrisy at work here.
Well, David, conservatives would say the answer is simple. Guns Arms are in the Second Amendment to the Constitution. Abortion is not. But that begs the question, really. There are many rights we take for granted that are not in the Constitution. The right to travel across state lines, the right of bodily integrity. You can't be forced to take medicine or undergo medical procedures. That's a right not found in the Constitution. The right to choose contraceptives, the right to marry someone of the same sex. All of these rights are not enumerated in the Constitution. Neither was abortion. And so that begs the question, as I say. But we are in a new era in the Supreme Court of the United States, and therefore in our country. The Supreme Court is now in the hands of not only very deeply conservative justices, but activist justices. What you saw yesterday and today are justices who reach out to decide on the sweeping grounds, the most sweeping grounds, the biggest issues, and award victory in these very, very serious and intense national debates to one side. That is what's happening. And I just want to let you know what Justice Stephen Breyer said about it in dissent. He said that Roe versus Wade was upheld in 1991 by the votes of Justices Sandra Day O'Connor, Anthony Kennedy, and David Souter. He said those were judges of wisdom, he says. They would not have won any contests for the kind of ideological purity that some court watchers want the justices to deliver. But if there were awards for justices who left this court better than they found it, and who for that reason left this country better, and the rule of law stronger, sign them up. We are in a new era where the reaching for the center to keep the court's legitimacy in the eyes of the public, to keep the debate going, is over. And we have a very, very strongly activist conservative court.
Terry Moran talking about a new era. Terry, thank you for that insight. A new era for the Supreme Court and this country, one in which the Chief Justice John Roberts seemed to allude to as well in what he wrote. We had mentioned this earlier. He said that we do not need to take the dramatic step of altogether eliminating the abortion right first recognized in Roe, but the Chief Justice not getting his way on that point. 5 justices, conservative justices, joining the majority opinion written by Samuel Alito, and very, very similar to the opinion that was leaked some weeks ago. A final thought from Kate Shaw, our legal scholar and our Supreme Court contributor. Kate, just for folks watching and digesting it here this morning, bottom line on the level of impact on lives across this country, of course, in particular on women's lives in this country. What do you make of the ruling?
Enormous and immediate impact, David. And I think that it will affect people's access in very tangible ways to a medical procedure that they have become accustomed to having the right to access now for nearly half a century in many, many states, over half of the states. And as the dissent points out, some states have passed bans that don't have exceptions for rape or incest. And in those states, girls or women could be forced to carry to term their rapist children. And as the polling tells us, those are incredibly unpopular laws, and yet several states have moved to or actually passed those laws. And so incredibly dramatic impact. And I also think impact for other rights. What the court says is, in trying to figure out what liberty means or what equality means, we have to look to history. And the dissent says, well, if we're looking at history, most of history didn't acknowledge that women had full, equal citizenship. And so history is always going to cash out in ways that aren't advantageous to women and to their full liberty and equality. And so I don't think this decision stops in any way with access to abortion. And I do think that things like contraception and also, same-sex marriage are very much, up for grabs based on the method that the majority opinion uses. So I think this case is about much more than just abortion.
Kate Shaw on the immediate impact on women across this country, and then the questions being asked right now about issues beyond abortion in this country that could be impacted given the decision from the Supreme Court today and how they came to that decision. The fact that it could now impact other issues in this country, deeply personal issues in this country. One last check-in over at the White House. Mary Bruce, our senior White House correspondent, standing by waiting for word from the president. And we expect to hear from President Biden at some point today, Mary?
David, we have just learned that the president will be speaking here in about an hour at 12:30. We will have to wait until then, it seems, to get any reaction from the president. He has, though, of course, in the past said that this would be a radical decision. He has warned, as you have been discussing, of the potential trickle-down effect of this decision, how it could impact other rights in this country, and he has been bracing for this decision, weighing his potential executive options. I asked the White House yesterday how quickly the president would move on any executive action. They said he's still weighing his options. It seems he hasn't made a decision yet. And while there certainly are plenty of things he could possibly do, the president is also well aware that an executive order can't reestablish a constitutional right, and that any action he takes is likely to be caught up in protracted legal battles. And that is why I suspect you will hear the president again today saying that this comes down to voters, that it's not just about elected officials at the state level, which will be incredibly important going on, but also who represents Americans here in Washington. Because, of course, Congress could pass legislation codifying Roe. That is something the president has called for. But that means that Americans are going to have to get out and elect more pro-abortion right candidates. And that is something that the president has been urging for. I think you're going to hear him make that plea again today, David.
Mary Bruce reporting from the White House that we will be hearing from the president shortly, reacting to this historic move from the Supreme Court. When the president speaks, we will bring that to you live. In the meantime, as you've been watching our coverage this morning, the Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade, turning that decision-making back to the states, and we know that will have immediate impact in some 26 states in this nation, 13 of which have trigger laws, they call them, which immediately change abortion rights and access in their states. Our coverage is going to continue on ABC News Live and abcnews.com. I thank our team for their careful and thoughtful analysis on all sides of this issue, and I'll be back, of course, with the president when he addresses the nation, and then later for our coverage on World News Tonight. I'm David Muir in New York. Until then, good day.